Not only does he have the highest curse energy output in history, but he also has to be the coolest Jujutsu Sorcerer to ever live. Who else do you know can just sit back and smoke while leaving a 3-way domain clash? Now look, I don't want to talk about what happened to him in the recent chapters, and I might get into that later into the video, so I'm just letting everybody know, spoilers, beware. If you're not caught up about, the past 3-4 chapters, then, I'm going to say something that you haven't read yet, but it's cool, we move. So the way we get introduced to Ryu is just this cool panel around chapter 173, where the Culling games is sort of really getting started and we're learning about these new players. And we see this guy with this offset outfit, this type of fit that we don't see anybody wear, and this different type of hairstyle. And it says right above him, Ryu Ishigori with 77 points. He's a hotshot who boasts the highest curse energy output of all the players. That might be, one of the coolest titles to hold, having the highest curse energy output. Just he's saying like, hey, we all fight with curse energy. I can shoot the most of it out, Now, yeah, it doesn't mean that he's the strongest around, but it's just a really cool title to have. He is very strong. This highest curse energy output has to be one of the best titles to hold as a sorcerer. You know how Yuta is known for his high durability? He has this water tank that surrounds him, is what they call it. When he's fighting against Ryu, he remarks his output's high and he releases curse energy with near instantaneous explosiveness. His movements are fast and precise. If I don't guard well, even I would take damage. It's like we just got introduced to this Ryu guy, and this is when they first started fighting, up on the rooftop. This is before Yuta, got Rika and all of that. We learned that this guy is so strong, even with just his punches, that he can damage Yuta. I mean, this guy is just a Chad. And this isn't even the first time we see him be a Chad. We see him be a Chad later in the fight, so let's just get to those moments. So throughout the fight, Ryu has this thing where he talks about this plate or this meal, and he talks about how he's unsatisfied. And what he means by unsatisfied is he's not getting the fight he wants. He wants to be pushed to his limits, and so he can finally be happy. So when he's having this initial confrontation with Yuta on the rooftop, he says, "Why am I unsatisfied? I think I'm unsatisfied because I ain't full," and he blasts Yuta off the rooftop. It's like he wants Yuta to be stronger. He wants Yuta to fight harder. That way he gets a better fight out of Yuta and he can be full. Also, remember when Ryu shot out a blast at Yuta as he was falling, but Uro just whips the blast around and throws it back at Ryu and it hits him? Ryu just tanks it. I mean, he just falls down, sure, but he's not even like really damaged, and all he says is, "Well, never been hit by my own technique before." Sure packs a wallop, and he literally just blows it off. You see the air come out of his mouth. This guy's just Chad 101 if we've ever seen it before. Also, remember, by this point in the fight, Uro and Ryu had been jumping Yuta, and Ryu says to himself, his reverse curse technique is a problem, but it consumes a lot of curse energy. He used it every time Kuroshi, Uro, and I used our big moves, and I think you're finally bottoming out Akotsu. So without Rika here on the battlefield, Yuta has just kept on using reverse curse technique to heal from their attacks, and he's just losing curse energy by the minute, and Ryu is basically saying he thinks Yuta is bottoming out and he won't get full, which is why Ryu says, "It doesn't matter how fancy or delicious a cake shop is. When it's closing time and the windows are empty, it's still a disappointing sight. I guess it ain't you." This is the first person in the series we've seen have this like food type of philosophy. It's also like really cool because all of his analogies deal with sweetness. When he says it doesn't matter how fancy or delicious a cake shop is, he's basically comparing that to the quality of the sorcerer. Yuta's this special grade, supposed to be hyped up. He's supposed to be this fancy or delicious cake shop. And then Ryu says when it's closing time and the windows are empty, it's a disappointing sight. He's talking about what's happening right now with Yuta, and that Yuta is bottoming out and is probably about to lose the fight. So it's pretty cool how instead of just saying it like that, Ryu puts it in this fancy sort of food type of way. This is the first time we've sort of seen anything like this in the series, but he continues to do cool things later in the fight, so let's keep getting to those. Now, after Yuta summons Rika, Yuta does this like combo attack with Rika on Uro, and after they're done doing that, Rika comes over and punches Ryu in the face, and Ryu gets sent flying actually. And as he's tumbling around on the rooftop, Rika actually goes for a second punch, but right before she does, a fist just appears on her jaw, and it is Ryu, who stood up instantly and punched Rika so hard she got sent flying to the rooftop over 20 meters away. And he says, "I've still got an appetite that calls for an extra large helping." Instead of saying, "I'm fighting this strong curse," he says, "I just have an appetite that calls for an extra large helping." Like Rika's supposed to be the extra large helping. It's like Ryu just doesn't even care that Rika just showed amazing strength that could send him flying. He's more so happy, and he has this smile on his face, and he even fixes his hair and leans backwards. It's like he gets a thrill from this, which, I mean, he's letting us know this entire time he does get a thrill for these kinds of fights. Then we get to this point where Yuta and Uro are going back with their philosophies. You know, Uro thinks that Yuta was a part of this clan from a long time ago, and she's trying to tell him, oh, the only ones who say that are people who've already achieved something. Because Yuta was just trying to tell Uro to basically live differently and sort of be a nicer person, but Uro wasn't having it. But Ryu, hearing all of this, doesn't care at all. Without even saying any words to each other, Ryu just says, "All shut up." At this point, words are pointless, and everybody just pops their domain expansion. I think the craziest part about this is that Ryu says this in his head, and like he doesn't say this out loud. All three of them at the same time just realized it was time to pop a domain expansion. I don't know if they saw the curse energy welling up in Ryu, and they're like, oh, it's time. Or if they just had some sort of mind transfer, like, hey, let's all pop domain. But it's just so cool how at this same point in time, without anybody saying a word, they all just realized it was time to pop a domain. So they all just did it at the same exact time. And then as soon as they get in the domain, you know, Ryu has this smile on his face talking about some gotta be short and sweet. Like, what's good with this guy? It's great, but it's also like funny at sometimes. Now there's this moment after the domain clash, you know, it breaks apart. Uro loses an arm and so on. And after Uro loses her arm, you know, everybody sort of comes to this realization. And Ryu says, Akotsu is thorough. Even if Uro uses reverse curse technique, regenerating a missing arm would be a hell of a feat. And Ryu says, that's enough, Uro. I didn't invite you guys to this table. And here we learn what Ishigori's curse technique is. Ishigori's curse technique is curse energy discharge. Ishigori is the only sorcerer capable of releasing the same amount of power regardless if he's activated his curse technique. I mean, oh my, this guy just outputs so much curse energy that even after a domain clash, even whether he's using his curse technique or not, his curse energy output is just the same amount of power. And then Yuta just uses positive energy and blows away the cockroach that's laying there on the ground. So it's sort of like Ryu took out Uro and Yuta just took out the cockroach. And now Ryu says to Yuta, welcome to my table, because they are the last two here. And it's just so cool how even though Ryu, it seems like he sort of likes Uro, you know, it just doesn't matter. Because as soon as it comes time for him to fight Yuta, he just basically tells Uro, like, it is time to go. This is our table. I didn't invite you guys. And he just blasts her away in one blast. And it's also cool, like I said, he has this whole eating sort of thing where he tells Yuta, welcome to my table, and he fixes his hair again. Also, we get this really cool panel when Yuta and Ryu are about to clash blast, and they're just building up their blast. And here it says, Yuta can only release a directed high output blast of curse energy while Rika is completely manifested. Even at full power, however, it is still slightly weaker than Ishigori's blast. So he needed to rapidly build up curse energy and fire before his opponent reached maximum power. That was his intention, but the intense look in Ishigori's eyes expressed over 400 years of hunger and thirst. And Ryu says in his head, let's use every last drop. Though he'd probably never find meaning in fighting, Ishigori's gaze melted Yuta Akotsu's heart. And after this is said, they clash blast. And at first it sort of looks like it's even, you know, the blasts met in the middle, but it quickly just goes in Ryu's favor as his blast overpowers Yuta's and just knocks him against a building. And after this, Ryu says, that was seriously sweet, Akotsu. Here's an idea, let's go again. So one really cool thing that I think was mentioned in this blast clash was where it says the intense look in Ishiguri's eyes expressed over 400 years of hunger and thirst. You gotta keep in mind, the Culling Games is 400 years in the future from where Ryu was around. So over 400 years has passed and he's very hungry. You know, he's very thirsty for battle, and he's been waiting for so long to finally get a taste, which is what he's been expressing this entire time. The whole thing with the table analogies, everything being sweet, everything tasting good, he's been waiting 400 years, so, you know, of course he's gonna feel this way. It's been such a long time. Now, one really cool thing that does happen after this blast clash is Yuta decides to dash towards Ryu, and he has Rika shoot a blast at Ryu, but Ryu just catches the blast and says, "That wasn't very powerful." What? Rika just shot a blast at Ryu. He just puts one hand up and says, "That wasn't very powerful." And then he says in his mind, "In addition to domain expansion and this meal with me, I don't think you can replenish very fast." And this is where the battle goes bad for Ryu. He uses Granite Blast to try to end the fight, but Yuta just uses Uro's curse technique that he copied earlier and bends the blast towards the sky. You know, Ryu is sort of panicked when he sees this. He's like, was that Uro's curse technique? I didn't think he was a mere curse speech user. I thought that big thing had a curse technique of its own. So like in Ryu's mind, he never knew this entire time that Yuta was actually copying curse techniques. He thought that Rika just had a curse technique of her own. And then Yuta and Rika go to try to jump Ryu. You know, Yuta has Rika punch Ryu on top of the head. But even after getting punched, Ryu just has this cool look on his face. Look at how insane this guy looks. He just cocks his fist back and punches Rika so hard that as the connection ends, she just dissipates from existence. It's like he was energized or thrilled after being hit by Rika. It's like he wanted more. You know, sadly, this is where the fight ends. The blast that Yuta curved earlier came back down and hit Ryu, which resulted in the end of the fight. And instead of being mad or resentful towards Yuta in any way, Ryu just says, "Thank you, my stomach is full now." And we also get this flashback scene. Remember when Kenjaku visited Kashimo and gave him the deal? And Kashimo was basically around at the same time that Ryu was. You know, Kenjaku goes, "I know about this guy that has the greatest curse energy output ever, and it happened in Date Province. He's a veritable cannon." But you know, obviously Kashimo doesn't go to accept the fight. But one real interesting thing I see here is that Ryu's balding. He has like one strip of hair on the top of his head. So, you know, I'm just gonna ask you guys, do you think he still could use Granite Blast at this stage in his life? Because he doesn't look old, right? Like, sure, he's lost a lot of hair, but his facial features and such, he looks probably in like his 40s or late 30s. So he's not old. It's not, he probably hasn't like lost that much of a step physically. But in terms of using curse energy output, I mean, I don't know if you guys think he's shooting Granite Blast out of that piece of hair on his head. Or maybe his hair wore away from using so much Granite Blast. You know, just, hey, think what you want. But I just want to know if you guys think that he still can use Granite Blast at this point in his life when he only has this much hair on his head. Now listen, I'm going to go ahead and give a spoiler warning because I'm about to get into something that happened in the recent chapters. And that is, you know, Ryu's downfall, we'll call it. So if you don't want to hear the spoilers, then, you know, just skip about a minute ahead, or maybe 2 minutes, but, you know, let's just get into it. So for those of you who know, or for those of you who want to know, this is the end of Ryu Ishiguri. After Sukuna gets out of his bath, we just get this sort of cutscene to Ryu standing on a rooftop, and he says, "No, no, 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 this is way too sweet." And Uro says, "He has come, the king of curses." And it just jumps to Ryu and Sukuna down on the street. Because if you don't know, by this point, Sukuna just got done taking the bath that was prepared for him. And now he's finally come out of the bath and he's ready to fight. And the first person we see Sukuna come across is Ryu. Yeah, so it's basically like Ryu is going to be the first opponent for Sukuna after the bath and the first victim. So we get to this cut where Ryu and Sukuna are across from each other, and Sukuna walks up to Ryu and says, "Are you going to step aside or not?" We see Ryu's hand move towards Sukuna like in order to hit him, but Ryu just gets slashed, and we see this slash appear across his entire body. And Sukuna actually says, "What's the deal? I wanted to slice you in 3, you're not so bad." So, Sukuna actually did fail in slicing Ryu in 3, but Sukuna wasn't serious right here. If you're sort of confused by what Sukuna means, remember in the early chapters when Sukuna was finding that first finger bearer, back when they were at the detention center? Remember how Sukuna said he only meant to slice the cursed spirit into 3 parts, but he ended up slicing the cursed spirit into like 8? If you're too weak, when you come across the curse technique, you just get sliced into a bunch of pieces. But in Ryu's case, he was too strong, so instead of getting sliced 3 times, he only got sliced once. And Sukuna just says to Ryu, "Sorry for underestimating you, next time I'll fight for real." And Ryu tries to take a step back, and here we go. Ryu tries to dash backwards, and he says, "Granted," and we see the curse energy begin to build up in Ryu's hair. But as he says this, Sukuna just appears behind him, and there are 2 cuts on Ryu's face, one in his forehead, one on his nose, and that is the end of Ryu. His head has now been cut into 3 parts, and Ryu is dead. But even though this was the end of Ryu, I think Ryu is a model case for don't be sad that it's over, be glad that it happened sort of thing, because while we had Ryu, he was just so cool. Everything from his philosophies during his fight with Yuta, the whole plate thing, I'm not full, and then even up to him being happy after his fight with Yuta. He was happy that he lost because he was happy that he was finally full. It just all comes into this great character who we've never seen before. And also his style, like he dresses like nobody else. He has this unorthodox style, and he has this unorthodox way of speaking, and he just has these really cool philosophies. And even, up to his ending, where he said that Sukuna was a meal that was just way too sweet. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. And if you enjoyed JJK content, then please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, as I post videos every couple of days on different topics you guys give me and a few topics I come up with on my own. Thank you for watching. See you next time.